Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. I also create simple baking lives where we undertake baking sessions live where we talk through ingredients selection, the process of the baking process, and also look at the outcome of our bake so that we are confidently inspired to undertake your own baking at home. Today we're in for a treat. We're making a humble cupcake. It seems like we have inadvertently started a whole cupcake series where I have baked quite a few cupcakes here. Probably makes sense because when I tried a loaf cake, it didn't kind of go to plan. So I'm happy to stick with a cupcake. But throughout each cupcake, we've been able to identify the goal for our cupcake and tweaked our ingredients to get exactly the results we want. So today is no different. We're going to be baking the humble vanilla cupcake. But the treat in it is that we are going to turn that vanilla cupcake into a chocolate cupcake. Essentially, this is going to be a one recipe two sponge cupcakes derived out of it. Now, when you're getting a base recipe to be turned into a different sponge or cupcake for this matter, you want to be careful about a few considerations you need to make, especially the modifications. Normally, this would require the addition of extra ingredients. In this case, we have cocoa powder that will be added. And sometimes just changing one recipe into another thing, like a different sponge, is not just about the addition of another ingredient. It is also being able to identify the process so that you get the best outcome for the secondary option you are deriving from this base recipe. So in this case, we have a vanilla, but because we want to change that vanilla into a chocolate cupcake, we want to be careful we are not over mixing our butter, and we also want to make sure the addition of extra ingredients such as the cocoa butter doesn't affect the texture and outcome of our cupcake in total. In this case, I'll be looking out for over mixing because we'll be creating the whole cupcake recipe first, from which we'll divide the butter and then add the secondary ingredients. So over mixing and handling the cupcake batter will be a great concern for me. I've been in this particular bake session, I've been able to modify and tweak the exact quantities of ingredients and to make sure that we troubleshoot any issues that may arise. Hopefully we don't, but I've also made sure that my ingredient selection is going to be able to solve some of the problems I have identified in case we want to turn a cupcake recipe, a basic classic vanilla cupcake, into a chocolate cupcake. From that, the next thing we're probably going to do is that we have some frozen buttercream. So we're going to bring the buttercream back and use that to frost our cupcakes. The reason why that is really important is because normally, whilst buttercream has to be at room temperature to be piped onto a cake or cupcake, sometimes life happens and then you forget to get your buttercream out. Preferably, I like to make my buttercream a day or two before, just to let it set in the fridge for the flavors to develop. I've had a whole conversation about how to store buttercream so that you can get the best result out of it. And one of the things you want to consider is when you store a buttercream, you want to make sure the environment within which it is kept doesn't have too strong smelling substances, because butter tends to attract or take up the smells within the environment in which they are kept. The convenience for me, however, is that I have a completely dedicated baking fridge where I can store my buttercream and then bring it up to room temperature before use. However, today I completely forgot, but it's not so much forgetting about it. It's also because I thought it would grant us the opportunity to bring frozen buttercream back into normal process and to use it to top our cupcake when it is done. The vanilla cupcakes are going to be topped up. The chocolate ones probably won't, because the buttercream won't stretch enough. But as this series develops, I will be creating different recipes and different troubleshooting methods, just so that you are better informed to undertake your own processes at home. I have a ton of tutorials on this channel breaking down the decorating process into informative, understandable pieces for you to digest and also feel confident to undertake your own decorating at home. So do check the channel homepage for the various tutorials and a catalog of playlists that I have on there. But I also have this live series which has been started since last week. So there's a ton. One key thing I just want to inform you though is that on our lives we test what we bake, which is important because I could prep all of these and bake a batch. And so that I don't waste your time or hold you on the live, I wait. And when we finish the process, I bring the pre-baked goods back. The intention here is to actually give you live results of what we have made. So for me, it's key that we go and come back and have a look if necessary. So for this first part of the live series, we're going to bake through the entire cupcake and then turn the batter into a chocolate batter for the chocolate cupcakes. And then if I can push it, we'll be able to box our cupcakes and wrap it neatly so you can see how you can undertake your baking at home, package it nicely so that even as an amateur, you can look like a pro. So without having to waste your time, let's talk to some ingredients here. There is granulated sugar here that I'm going to be using. So the base recipe here is the classic vanilla recipe for me, which I have on this channel. Because there's going to be an adaptation of that, I've tweaked the quantity slightly. I'll leave the details of all of that in the description box for you to check out. But there's granulated sugar here, and in place of that you can use caster sugar. It will guarantee a more delicate and softer crumb, but failing that, granulated sugar should be all right. I also have some flora margarine. For my cake and buttercream, I tend to go with margarine unless specifically requested that it is replaced with butter. But same quantities of the margarine can be replaced with butter, which is a little more flavorful. So if you're a butter person, completely okay to swap the margarine for butter. Over here, I also have some eggs that have been broken. I have whipped them together so that they can come along nicely when I am mixing those into the batter. Over here, I have some milk with white vinegar, white wine. Can't speak. I have milk with white wine vinegar, which has made some homemade buttermilk here. But besides that, I have actually short bought buttermilk that has some cocoa powder in it, some extra cocoa powder here with a pinch of salt and some soda bicarbonate. We have vanilla here, but most importantly, we have flour. If you followed my live tutorials, I talk a lot about the type of flour I use for my cakes and cupcakes. In that, while self-raising flour is my preferred flour to use for cakes, using the same quantity in cupcakes doesn't give me great results. So I tend to add some parts of self-raising flour to parts of plain flour. By so doing, I don't add extra leavening or rising agent into my flour, except for a pinch of salt. This is sifted to aerate it a little bit, and I have added a whisk to whisk it up. These are the base ingredients I will be needing. Of course, for the vanilla cake, we'll be starting off without using the cocoa butter. But when we divide the butter into two, you will see how all of this will come together. So hopefully, because we're going to be seeing the result of our bake today, you'll get to see exactly how all of these ingredients are going to come together for us to get not just a cupcake for vanilla, but we also get a chocolate cake. If for some reason you're asking, why can't I simply make a chocolate cupcake? That I have a completely different recipe for chocolate, and there are different types of recipes that can give you different outcomes. Except this is for convenience, but I want to be able to achieve the result of one sized bake without compromising on the quality of the outcome, right? So whilst this is simply for convenience, because then I can bake large batches, split it up, especially when you are undertaking large batches of baking several flavors, it probably works best to develop a base recipe that can be tweaked slightly in the process without the additional work. However, I want to be able to enjoy the convenience of doing that without compromising on the quality of the outcome, which is that if I wanted to change a vanilla cupcake to a chocolate cupcake, I shouldn't have issues like the chocolate cupcake being too dry or being too heavy or developing too much gluten, right? So I just want the base recipe to be able to turn around and make a secondary cupcake for me without any issues. And that is the goal for this particular recipe. So without having to waste your time, I'm going to engage the stand mixer here. Now, in previous live sessions, I have completely used a hand mixer. And I have said the reason for that is simply for convenience and quantity, because I have baked smaller batches of cupcakes, which are like a dozen or so. But for this one, we're baking hopefully a dozen vanilla ones and a dozen chocolate. So it just makes sense for me to have the stand mixer here. Now for this, if you don't have a stand mixer, a hand mixer for this quantity should do. I am just going for convenience today. It's nearly 11 p.m. UK time. I don't have time to engage a small hand mixer. Also, the motor of a small mixer, especially for this recipe, can be tricky because I can't regulate it very much as I can this one. So that is probably one good reason. But if you're a beginner baker and you don't have a stand mixer and yours is a hand mixer, completely fine, especially for the quantity we are trying to make here. One last thing, I'm gonna preheat the oven. I have just preheated that to 160 degrees C. And when we get through the entire process, I'll give you a good tip for also getting an even bake in the oven. So over here, the bowl is already set. We have the sugar, which goes in, and I'm gonna add the butter here. Of course, as always, ensure your butter or margarine is at room temperature so that it creams well. Another thing is that this recipe can be swapped parts for oil if you like, but I'll probably come back and create that tutorial also. So for today, we have just the butter, vanilla, and sugar in there. I'm going to cream that for at medium high speed for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll come back and add the eggs. But when we get there, I will let you know. Now that's been creaming for a little while now. I think about a minute or two. If you've been in the live chat, perhaps give me an update on how long this has been creaming for. A good thing to do is to ensure that whilst the sugar and butter is creaming together, you ensure that all the other bits on the side of the bowl is scraped in so we have a uniform mix. We want to be careful not to over cream our butter and margarine at this stage, because when we do that, it is likely to affect the rise of the cupcake when it comes out of the oven. So I think that's about enough. Plus, because we are going to be turning the base recipe, because we're going to be turning the base recipe into a chocolate cupcake, I am very mindful of the technique used here because we don't have too much room to maneuver. But hey, who knows? If we make mistakes, look, over here we're quite vulnerable and honest, and I do encourage sharing your mistakes so you're confident, because every opportunity of a mistake you make is a good lesson to learn not to repeat such a mistake again. And baking is a science which, if you have understanding of the processes, will help your outcomes for you, but the science of it can also be unpredictable. So I am not guaranteeing so much perfection over here, but let's see how it goes. So I'm gonna add the eggs in right now. We have about 267 grams of eggs. That's about 5 to 6 large eggs here. Now we want to make sure that the entire mixture is homogeneous here. So there's a spatula that I'm using over here. Okay, now our eggs are mixing. At this stage, if you're not used to baking, depending on what your weather is and what temperatures of your ingredients are, you might feel that at this point there is a break in your mixture here, and you can see it curdle. It's mine hasn't, but it's a known or common problem that arises for the creaming process. And if that's the case, don't worry, it will come together when you add the flour. But the eggs have gone in now and it's okay. So I'm going to add the self-raising flour. The good thing about this mixer is we have a fold function here. So I'm going to use that to turn the flour in slowly. And it is critical to observe this part just so that we can guarantee ourselves some great results. So I'll be talking you through that in a moment. I am just alternating the solids with the buttermilk here, the homemade buttermilk. Now at this stage, just as the flour has mixed in, if I was making just vanilla cupcakes, I'll probably let it mix a little bit up to about maybe 40 to 45 seconds. But I'm not going to do that because I'm going to be remixing the batter, adding additional ingredients to create the chocolate cupcake. I am careful not to overmix it at this stage. So I'm going to stop the mixer now as I've done, and perhaps do the rest of the mixing by hand, and I'll show you that in a moment. So what I've done here is that the flour has just about, so if you could have a peek into my mixer here, you would see that there is still dry flour on the surface of the batter here. And that is simply by intention, as I have just explained, because what I don't want to do is overmix my batter, right? So what I'm going to do here is simply mix the rest here by hand. Right. Normally, I will have to separate the batter into two, but I know how many vanilla cupcakes, and in fact, the key thing is that I am more interested in getting my vanilla cupcakes right also. So the batter is mixed up here, and I only need about a dozen vanilla cupcakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, and dish the 12 out for a minute before I mix the chocolate cupcakes. Now, a good tip for spreading the cupcake batter is to make sure you have some warm water into which you can dip your scoop. It prevents the cupcake from sticking to the scoop and helps with distributing the butter easily. Now I want about 15 cupcakes instead of an exact dozen, just so that there is room for testing and tasting as well. And so that is exactly what I am going to do. The good thing is that you can mix and match your ingredients and do whatever you want to get the outcomes you are aiming for. So there's a dozen cupcakes here. I'm gonna stick those to one side, and the only reason I am adding the 3 to have 15 cupcakes is simply so that there is enough to taste too. Right, now we have enough butter left behind, but for your benefit, I am just going to measure the batter out so that we know what we are working with. Okay, we have exactly 585 grams of classic vanilla cupcake batter. What I'm going to do is I am going to add this mixture. Now this mixture is some buttermilk and cocoa powder and 10 mils of oil with a pinch of salt and some coffee in there. The idea of mixing the cocoa powder into the buttermilk here is to bloom the cocoa butter a bit, and also to prevent over mixing the butter, because when we add the powdered cocoa butter, cocoa powder here into the butter, sometimes it can be difficult to mix it evenly rather quickly. So what I've done is I have gone ahead and mixed the cocoa powder into buttermilk. And what buttermilk does here is ensure that the cocoa powder is moisturized, and when it's added into the batter, it can be absorbed rather quickly without the fear of over mixing the batter. So we have the good thing about this particular butter here is that you can completely tweak it to your needs. So if you want it to be very chocolatey, you can increase the amount of cocoa powder, and because we already have the buttermilk and oil to increase or retain the moisture in the butter, you don't end up with dry cupcake even if you increase the amount of cocoa powder in here. Right, 1/4 teaspoon of soda, yeah, just so that it can make up for the rise, because we are already using self-raising flour. We don't want to over mix or over beat our batter, but we want a good rise to guarantee a good texture. So that's essentially our batter here. Now we're going to just put that, yeah, and I think that would have made a dozen cupcakes too, but I only filled 2 dozens here. So we have some simple chocolate cupcakes derived from, and when filling the cupcake cases, you want to be sure not to overfill them, so maybe 2/3 of the way up, so that you can leave room for some rise in there. Now, one thing I complain about a lot is this, right? Cupcake batter or cake batter, that's not enough to do anything, but I don't want to waste it either. So I don't know, I'm just going to leave that now. But we're done with our cupcakes butter here. One last thing, if you've been on this channel, this is my quick tip for ensuring that your oven doesn't get too hot. I have a convection fan oven, which means there's a fan at the back of my oven that blows the air and distributes it around the oven for me. But there are also some hot spots in there which I can't seem to regulate at the moment. So when I put cupcakes in, it runs on the hotter side towards the end of the oven. So one way I try to solve that problem or reduce the risk of burning in the corners of my cake or cupcake is to put some moisture or water on the bottom of the oven. What that does is it evaporates into the oven, and what it does is it serves as a cooling system of some sort, cooling the oven so it doesn't overheat, because by so doing it allows the cupcakes to rise slowly, evenly at a good temperature and bakes well. You have a tender, more delicate or softer crumb without too much crusting. So that is a good tip, to add a bowl of water, but you also want to make sure that whatever you use is heat proof so you don't have issues with that. So I'm going to drop that on the bottom, and we have that. And we have that too. Now for the buttercream, first of all, I'm going to scoop as much as I can in here and get the process going. If you want to learn how to make Swiss meringue buttercream, I have a ton of videos on this channel teaching you exactly how to do that. So besides this, I've just put enough in there. Another thing we can do is just put the entire bits here in the microwave, maybe for 40 seconds at 20 minutes intervals. But perhaps let's try it now and see what we get. Right? And you want to be able to get the microwave setting right so that you don't have bits that are still chilled and other parts that are just runny. But 10 seconds, or it's exactly 12 seconds in, and that has come back to that has almost come back to, well, I did say 20 minutes intervals and 20 seconds intervals, but at 12 seconds we have it back at where we want it to be. So what I am going to do is just mix this right in here with the frozen part, and I'll tell you what to do next. Because even with the frozen part that has gone in here, by mixing it together, we are likely to see it break apart. It looks like it's come together, no problem. So I'm just going to add the rest in. Links to how to make Swiss meringue buttercream and all the relevant information will be left in the description box for you. Yeah? And I think the buttercream from frozen to room temperature in less than what 10 minutes we have it. So there we have it, and it's ready now for us to top the cupcakes with, except we can't top it with the cupcakes right now because the cupcakes haven't finished baking here. If you have further questions, leave them in the chat. Well, our vanilla cupcakes are baked. Well, I am pleased to inform you our cupcakes baked all right. We have some rather interesting results here. So, the vanilla cupcakes came out perfectly. This was overfilled a little bit, so yes, that came up. But otherwise, we have a nice, lovely cupcake. I'm going to put them on a tray. So you can see. So we have the vanilla cupcakes baking perfect here. These are a dozen cupcakes that have baked perfectly here. And even the extra 3 that went in the other cupcake tray. They are very light. Very light. The moisture in that cupcake is amazing. So tender crumb, light, fluffy, flavorful. You want to definitely try this recipe. Now let's talk about our chocolate. Some have come out okay. Right, they all came out okay. However, I'll tell you some problems we've had here. Like this one is over risen. Now why that is because I probably overfilled it. But the consistency of the batter might also be a thing. I'm not sure. Moisture is great. It is not too chocolatey either. So besides the cupcake falling over the lips of the cupcake cases, the cupcakes themselves, amazing. Now, this happens sometimes. It may be a case of the base recipe not turning up quite perfectly. This is a recipe I developed myself and have gotten great results. Today, it decided that it wasn't going to budge. But supposing we are just trying to get the best results out of here, it's not perfect, but it's not bad either. We can top these up with chocolate buttercream and the sauce, and it will still be great cupcake. But for every bake we undertake, the goal is always to see if we are arriving at perfect results or there are other things we need to learn and improve. And clearly, I'm going to have to dig back at the base of this cupcake recipe and find out what is different. The good thing, however, is that as we break into the crumb, we have moisture here. It's not dry. The chocolate is still not overwhelming. It is light, has a great mouth feel. So, you know what? I am not mad about it.